This segment is Delegate Mike Pushkin. He is the state's Democratic Party leader as well. Good morning, Mike. How are you, sir?
Good morning. How are y'all doing?
We're doing great ever since I got a room at Gilstrap's house after giving my watch my wife a like new watch. Merry Christmas to you, sir.
No, Merry Christmas to you, too.
Your party has gotten a little publicity recently, maybe for not the reasons that you were expecting.
A brand new member.
Yes. When Delegate-elect Joseph DeSoto switched his party registration and affiliation to the Democratic Party, which brought your membership temporarily up to 10. Mike, first, your reaction to that switch, and secondly, the difference that 10 members makes versus 9 when it comes to any procedural moves that you'd like to make.
Okay, well, I'll answer the second part first. People ask, well, what's the difference between 9 and 10? Well, first of all, 1 is the difference. But also, it might seem minor, but if we're going to call for a roll call vote, you need 10% to sustain the roll call. And then, so you'd need 10 members to sustain a roll call vote and get people on record for voting for an amendment if you want to, have a record of that amendment, which is important, especially when you're in the, loyal opposition. It's not you want to point out how members voted on a certain issue, and sometimes they don't want people to know how they voted on a certain issue or an amendment. Also, when you're talking about if it's proportion in the makeup of the of committees, that would put us that puts you at about 2.5 out of 25, right? So you would if they decide to round up, it could get us an extra committee member on a committee or two. But I'd say that it was a. I would imagine that the party switch was really a parting gift to the Republican Party that I feel that the delegate-elect knew he was about to be expelled from. So I don't think it's a coincidence that he went and made the switch, on that day. And there was a law that was passed several years ago, which I was against. I would introduce another law to change that bad law, first day of session if I can. But it was, first of all, back in 2015, after the 2014 election, in 2015, remember, the Senate was tied. And Senator Daniel Hall then switched parties to give the Republicans the majority in the Senate that year. Then I believe the following session, when he took a job with the National Rifle Association, there was it went to the Supreme Court of whether he should be replaced by a Republican after he switched parties to Republican, or should it reflect the will of the people who elected him the last time he ran, and should it go back to the Democratic Party? Well, I feel the Supreme Court made a bad decision and didn't go with the will of the people and said, well, whatever party he is prior to the resignation, that's the party we go with. And then the legislature went back a session or two later, I can't remember exactly what year, and they doubled down on that bad decision and they codified that. So it says the party that, whatever they were in immediately preceding the vacancy, that's who would fill the vacancy.
So, Mike, are you saying you will introduce a law in February that states that you are the party you registered as?
I would introduce a law that would fix that bad law. And it is a bad law, but you know what? It's the law right now. That's where it stands right now. In fact, we tried, the Democrats in the House last year tried to amend another bill to fix that error in the law last session. It actually made it through the House, and it didn't make it through the Senate. So we could have fixed that issue last year, but they chose not to do it for whatever reason. So that is where the law stands right now. And I don't know how and first of all, there is no vacancy yet. Legally, there is no vacancy yet. But I believe when that vacancy, when there is a vacancy, I believe that will go to the Berkeley County Democratic Executive Committee to send 3 names to the governor.
And regarding the vacancy, because we do have a question on our Facebook page from Scott Brown as to whether or not it is an official vacancy, can you explain the process of how this works to remove a member, because this was done not all that long ago with Derek Evans, who is a delegate-elect in the Republican Party, and it appears to be happening again to Joe DeSoto.
I can't. I thought Derek was. I believe he resigned first.
I think he was given the option.
I don't. Okay, so I don't remember. Yeah, I was in the legislature at that point. Last time there was an expulsion, it was before my time. But I know that after in the first day of the session after an election, we do certify the election results, but that's generally cut and dry. I mean, if there was no issue with the election, if there wasn't a tie or some sort of discrepancy with the election, which there was not, he won more than vast majority of the voters in that district. Then we certify the election, and I believe that after that, then they would vote. If he doesn't resign first, I believe they will vote on an expulsion, and that's when the vacancy will be created.
But that can't happen until they get together in January and are sworn in and seated. Correct.
They can't do that until the election is certified, because they don't have any sort of jurisdiction over him right now.
Mike, first, happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
The fact
it coincides with Christmas this year.
It does.
It does. Yeah, I
think Hanukkah is the 25th, which is rare, but it happens.
Yeah. But the fact that DeSoto is incarcerated, does that play any role at all in this decision process?
Well, it would make it very difficult for him to show up the first day of session. Yes, I think that does play a role in it. And I don't know what the discussion was, behind closed doors in the Republican caucus, but I don't see any reality where he's actually seated in the West Virginia House of Delegates at this time.
I guess my question was, could he be seated in absentia?
That's a good question. I don't believe you could be sworn in absentia. I mean, it says in the Constitution that the swearing in for the House of Delegates has to take place in the House chamber, and I believe that's in the state constitution.
John Gilstrap.
I'm curious if any of this, not just the process, but the threats of violence and such that preceded the process. Alleged threats of violence. Thank you. Do you think there's going to be a change one way or the other in the way future campaigns are done to be perhaps less vitriolic?
I certainly hope
Santa Claus is coming, John.
I mean, I certainly hope so. We keep saying that, but I mean, I think that if you paid attention to last during the campaign at the last Trump rally, there was a lot of vitriol being spread then, and he won. So if you look at the posts on social media, there's a lot of vitriol there, and people tend to get rewarded for this bad behavior these days. So I would like to think so, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's the way things are going. That the level of discourse is toned down. Doesn't seem to be the way that we're going, unfortunately. But I will say this, and you guys live up there, so you know this. The way the maps were drawn, it made red areas even more red. And when we're drawing the districts to benefit the party in power, rather than to just where people live, and it makes sense to keep communities together, keep Martinsburg in one district. When we're drawing maps to protect political power, and then the contest is in the primary rather than in the general election, what you wind up with is often the most extreme of each side. If you draw an extra red district, you get an extremist to the right. If you draw an extra blue district, you could get an extremist to the left, and that adds to the division in this country. So gerrymandering is a big part of this issue as well.
Senator Manchin was on CNN yesterday. I think the show is called Inside Politics, where he said that of the lessons that the Democrats should learn or should have learned through this last election cycle is that it was a mistake in retrospect to try to mainstream the extreme. That's his quote. do you, looking back, not just necessarily in West Virginia politics, but for Democratic politics in general, Democratic Party politics in general, do you think that resonates with you? Is it too hard a push to the extremes by the left, and is that what cost them the election, do you think?
Is that what cost the Democrats the election?
Correct, yes.
Is that the question? I
Yes.
mean, there's a whole lot of factors there. First of all, it was an unprecedented change at the top of the ticket. And what led to that is we had I thought a very good candidate, but she wasn't the candidate in the primary and had a very short runway to really introduce herself to the American people. So I think that's a big part of it as well. I didn't really, I attended the convention. I didn't hear a whole lot of the extreme views put out there, at least during the Democratic National Convention. I don't think she really ran on extremism. I don't think President Biden is an extremist. So I disagree with that's the reason why we lost. Personally, though, I think most people are somewhere in the middle, and that's where most of the work gets done. And I think, we need to shy away from a lot of this extremism. And unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of right-wing extremism in this next session. And I don't think that's where most people are. I don't think that's what most of these candidates ran on, but I think that's what we're going to get.
How do you think that's going to manifest itself, the right-wing extremism?
Well, with the types of legislation that is pushed, I think going way past where most West Virginians are, maybe, I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see.
Mike, the way I interpreted what Joe Manchin said was going back to what Mitt Romney said a couple so weeks ago, that the downfall of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, has been the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren component that has given the whole party this reputation of being ultra liberal.
Okay. Well, I know here in West Virginia that those of us that are still in office tend to be the adults in the room, and we're not exactly extremists. Those that are still serving here in West Virginia. I do think we need to meet voters where they are and talk about what's important to them. I think too often, though, we let ourselves get defined by the other side, and that's a problem. Because I know what we stand for is that people go to work, they should be able to make a living wage. They shouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to put food on their family's table. They should have a reasonable expectation to be safe at the workplace. We should have great public schools for everybody's kids. We should have good roads to drive on. We should have access to see a doctor, access to health care if, God forbid, we get sick. I think these are things that a whole lot of people agree with. I don't think that's extremism, but that's what the Democratic Party has always stood for. Now, we allow ourselves to be defined by all these issues that really don't have a whole lot of effect on our day-to-day lives. When they start talking more about bathrooms than classrooms, then we're in trouble.
Mike Pushkin is our guest here. He's the head of the Democratic Party in the state of West Virginia, elected delegate as well. Mike, where is the disconnect, as you see it, between the way West Virginians vote versus the way they live their lives? So somewhere along the way, those two paths separated. 75% of the money that comes into West Virginia is federal money, yet this is seemingly one of the most anti-federal government states in the Union. The workforce participation rates in West Virginia are extremely low. The percentages of West Virginians who receive federal money is extremely high. Yet overall and overwhelmingly, the state doesn't want the federal government in their lives.
Yeah, it reminds me of a sign I think I saw somebody holding back when President Obama was still president during the debate over the Affordable Care Act, and someone said, keep your government hands off my Medicare. There's a bit of a disconnect there. But I think too often what people pay attention to are the national politics for the most part, and it's where people get their information from these days is an issue too. That I think that's a place where the Democratic Party really dropped the ball, is where President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance, we're going on to these different podcasts that are very popular. Of course, they had, Elon Musk foot in the bill for him, who's the wealthiest person, and I'm sure he's real relatable to most West Virginians. The wealthiest person in the world who bought Twitter, turned it into X, and that's where a lot of people get their information from. I think it's a matter of where people are getting their information from. I started, sounding the alarm bells back during the campaign when I saw a very reputable statewide poll go out, said that the majority of West Virginia voters didn't know that Jim Justice had financial issues. They didn't know about any of his legal or financial issues. Now, I'm sure, it was reported on this station. It was reported on all through on newspapers throughout the state. It was very, very widely covered. And then there was a poll came out said most people didn't know about it.
Wow.
So I don't know where most people are getting their information these days, or if they're really seeking information at all. So that's something that I feel that we need to look into is just being. It's not so much what we're communicating; it's where we're communicating to reach voters where they are. But it's a whole different ballgame these days, and that's where we really dropped the ball on our side.
Realistically, as you head into this legislative session, whether your final number is 9 or 10, Mike, what type of ability does your party have to influence legislation with the way the numbers are?
I think the same ability that we had last session or the session before, and it's more than you might realize. When a lot of us have been there for a while and know how to get things done, and it's all about personalities and working across. Of course, we have to work across the aisle, but we can get a lot of things done for our districts that aren't hot button issues, or not the issues you read about in the newspaper. But things we're able to work in a bipartisan manner on. So we're able to influence a lot of decisions up there, and make some bad ideas a little less bad, a little less harmful. We're able to do that. But I think even with our small numbers, we have a good bunch up there. We stick together and we get things done.
There is, in the Republican Party, its own fissures, its own little fiefdoms that have arisen when you have 91 people on one side. They don't all agree on something. Are you able to work with some of those Republicans who might not be under the same umbrella as the others when it comes to certain legislation to affect laws? Is that how you do it?
Yeah, we're able to work with them. We're able to work with some. They may be under the umbrella. It just depends on what that issue is. You can always find commonalities, and that's what it's all about. A lot of times it's a lot less about the letter after the name and just more about personal relationships and how we work together.
Back to Joe DeSoto, with him not being sat yet, sworn in, if he is indeed replaced, is there any legal precedent as to what party he would be? They would be selecting from?
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. I think it's a very bad legal precedent, but the legislature went back and took that decision about Senator Daniel Hall back from 2015, and they codified it. That's the law. It says that whatever party he's in before the vacancy occurs, immediately preceding the vacancy, that's the party that gets to choose the replacement.
Yes,
so,
but Hall was sworn in. Hall was sworn in. DeSoto's not sworn in yet.
But there was just an opinion that came out back when just last month when the governor was talking special session. There was an opinion that came out from the Secretary of State said that the new legislature starts in December. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
So based on that,
so
then.
It doesn't. I mean, this is obviously we're in uncharted territory right now, and I think there's going to be, there's an argument to be made on the other side, but I think they're wrong, and because of, and I also think that this law is wrong and it should be fixed, but that's the law right now, and I would give you, here's an example. Say about if somebody gets elected. And, Party A, they're elected in Party A and they beat somebody in Party B, and then something happens between the election and by the time they're sworn in, whether it's an appointment or they suddenly die, something like that, would it go back to the party of the person that they beat in the election?
I assume this is all going to wind up in the court.
But it already has.
It could, but I think the law is fairly clear. That it did wind up in the court back in 2015. I felt that the court ruled in error, but then the legislature doubled down on it and codified it.
So if we extend this out, let's just assume that it goes that way. It comes back to the Democratic Executive Committee here in Berkeley County. Then they choose candidate A. And then candidate A is...
They submit 3 names first.
But the
They would
question
submit
is,
3 names from that district to the governor. That's
to the governor, and then the governor makes the appointment?
Correct.
Okay.
but the question is, are there 3 Democrats in that particular district?
That may be difficult to
It's going
find.
to be fine, tough to find.
Who want to drive to Charleston?
They are there. They are there, and I believe that we once if it's an appointment rather than asking somebody to it's difficult to recruit somebody to run in a district that is drawn to be so red. It's a as you all know, you live up there. That's what South Berkeley is, a very conservative area, but we do have members of our party up there who I think would be willing to serve and represent their friends and their neighbors in the legislature.
I think this whole thing gets re-adjudicated. I think this winds up in court again. I don't see a way it doesn't, because I don't see the Republicans giving up that seat easily.
Well, the
without
wild card is
but
that it was not yet
being
seated.
filed.
But it's where the law. I mean, they codified it, so it's in law now. And I said I'd be the first one to introduce a bill to fix it. I think it's wrong. I think it should reflect the will of the voters and not this decision that they codified back in 2015.
Here's what I know about attorneys, Mike. They leave just enough ambiguity in everything that gets written to allow something to be retried.
Mike, we're about to run out. We're about to run out of time, but a couple of points. Normally, the Republicans wouldn't have to worry about it because they have such a supermajority. But the fact you go from 9 to 10, now you're 10%. What does that provide you?
The roll call vote. He mentioned that earlier.
The leverage,
I mean,
yeah.
Last session we had 11. So, yeah, of course we're in a super-duper minority, but that's just one thing we'd be able to do is be able to sustain a roll call vote to ask for people to vote on record. That's one thing. And and this is all up to the speaker as well about how they apportion committee members, but it would be, and math is not my strong suit, guys.
About 15 seconds.
25, 10%, 25 is 2.5, so they could round up for committees. If they choose to, they could round up, and we could possibly get an extra member on the committee.
Mike Pushkin, thank you so much for your time.
That's the difference.
Much
Thanks for
appreciated.
having me on. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah, thanks.